This is a knitting and handspinning podcast where I talk about my love for all things fibre from my little corner of the world. Hello makers. It actually has been ages and I'm not sure that I remember how to podcast, but here I am. A huge welcome to new and returning viewers. And for those of you who don't know, in addition to this channel, you can also find me on Instagram at Sea Salt and Stone. I also think I forgot to tell you that my name is Vanessa. Also, if you're new, you can probably tell I'm out of practice. So I really wanted to film this podcast. Life has been probably I don't know if I would say the craziest it's ever been, but it feels like it's the craziest it's ever been. And before I kind of jump into sharing a few fibre things with you, I kind of felt like I owe a bit of an explanation to my viewers, because there's a few big things happening right now. So I guess I'll just dive right into maybe a bit of chatter. I hope you have something warm and cozy to drink. I have a nice hot cup of, you can really see the steaming tea here. This is some nice hot lemon verbena. And I have like a ray of sunlight that's creeping toward my face, so I feel like pretty soon I'm gonna have to change my entire podcasting setup right here. So, where to begin? I am in a new environment, as you can maybe tell. I'm actually parked on the floor right now. The floor of our new house. So we kind of unexpectedly bought a house in October. We closed on the house in early October. We, I think, originally placed the bid on the house in August, and we had just kind of started house hunting, and because the market here in Ottawa has been really crazy, actually, we didn't think that we were going to find anything this fall, We were just kind of starting to get our feet wet, looking for houses, figuring out what we really wanted, and just kind of touring the city with our realtor, looking at options. So that kind of really took me by surprise later in the summer, and a lot of our evenings and weekends were starting to be focused on house hunting. And then when we got this house, we only had about 6 weeks before closing the deal, and so there was just an incredible amount of paperwork and packing. And then early October it was moving, and we're all moved in now, and slowly starting to get settled, more and more settled. So that's been a wonderful thing, a huge blessing, and we feel incredibly grateful. We also moved into the same neighborhood where we were previously renting, so we're in Centertown, Ottawa, which has kind of always been dream of ours to live centrally, and we are just a few doors down from some really good friends of ours as well. So yeah, it's been crazy, but we feel so blessed. So there's that. A couple of other updates. I'll give you maybe the sadder news first. But earlier this week, our bunny Bo passed away, which I know many of you really loved kind of seeing him, very occasionally pop onto the podcast or onto some of the quiet vlogs that I have posted. And he really was a huge part of our life. And just, yeah, it's never easy to see a pet go. But there's also some relief in it all, because he has been has had some fairly chronic health issues since he was around 2 years old. It's, I come to you with a bit of a sad heart today, but I had a good couple of days to cry it out, and like I said, there's ultimately some relief in it all, because we know he's no longer in any discomfort with his health issues. So yeah, so that's kind of the sad news. And then the last, I guess, big update for you is that Dan and I are expecting our first baby to arrive in February. So I had actually found out that we were pregnant, I think it would have been early in the summer. I'm not going to give you an exact date because I'm terrible with timelines. But I am currently about 6 months pregnant with our first little one, which is really exciting. A little bit overwhelming given like everything that's kind of going on at once in the world and in our lives. So when I had found out earlier in the summer, I was still podcasting somewhat regularly on my kind of monthly basis. But for a couple months in the first trimester, I was pretty fatigued and, could conserve enough of my energy to like get through my work days and my chores. And then that was kind of it for a while, and there was hardly any knitting or fiber happening, so I also just didn't have anything to share with you, knitting or fiber wise. And I still don't have a ton to share with you, so I guess I'm hoping that you're all okay to just kind of go with the flow, because I don't know what the next season will hold. I'm hoping I can find a way to kind of either do, shorter podcasts, or maybe try to switch to more of a vlogging format if that is less time consuming for me. But once baby comes, baby will dictate what I am able to pull off, and I imagine that for at least the first few months, it's possible you may not see me at all. So that feels like a lot to share with you. But hopefully it's clear now why I have kind of been on hiatus for so long. So that's my update. And I have kind of slowly been able to work away at some fiber related things. So I do have some stuff to share with you today. So I think we can start. I'll try to follow my usual sequence. So I do have one finished object that I was knitting in the summer and never got to share with you. And it's a little too chilly now to wear it. Yes, I opted for a scarf instead. And you'll probably recognize this wrap if you've watched, I think it was my first ever podcast. This is a hand-spun garter stitch shawl, and it was one of my very first hand-spun projects. So I whipped that out to keep cozy today. So I have a finished rift tee. I'm gonna see, hopefully you can get a glimpse of it here. It's my finished rift tee. And you can see that there are so many kind of modifiable options with the rift tee. What I decided to do was a V-neck on one side and a scoop neck on the other side so that I can reverse it and wear it however I feel like wearing it, whether I want the V-neck in the front or the scoop neck in the front. I can switch it up. So I knit this, and the rift tee is a pattern by Jacqueline Cieslak. I knit the rift tee in the Queensland Collection United Cotton Wool Blend yarn. It's 45% cotton, 55% wool. Cotton is organic. It's non-mulesed wool. And I knit to get gauge, I had to knit the 44-inch bust. I was originally going for the 40-inch and wasn't getting gauge with this yarn. And I think I ended up, I think I knit the whole thing in US size 8 needles. Yeah, so overall, super happy with how the top turned out. I have to say that, like, the pattern was written in a brilliant way, but I did feel kind of like I had to just trust what the pattern was telling me, because especially when I got up to the neckline, I didn't quite know where the pattern was taking me. So it was a bit of like a leap of faith for me. You know, I've knit a lot of raglan sweaters and a lot of top down. I would say top down is usually my preference. This was my first time doing bottom up and doing a V-neck or a scoop neck without a collar, and so there was a lot of like new techniques for me, which was great. And I think that if I were to knit it again, I might enjoy it even more, also because I was in my first trimester knitting the neckline for this sweater, and I just was like, I just need to finish this. but I just had such a lack of energy and like brain power, mental capacity. Oh, that sunlight is going to chase me into the corner now. I might have to switch up my setup here. So that is my Rift tee. I've changed my setup. Don't know if this is going to be any better. Just gonna have to bear with me until I, figure out my usual, until I figure out a good spot for the quiet corner to be relocated. The lighting might just be a little bad. What else have I done? I did finish Dan's sweater. I finished putting some toggle buttons on it so he can finally wear that for this fall winter season, which is exciting, and probably early spring as well. I unfortunately don't have it with me, but I hope to get a photo of him wearing it, because I've actually washed and blocked it as well, and it's looking really, really nice on him. It's fitting him perfectly, so I've been super pleased with that. I also finished my sister's birthday socks and sent those off to her in August. I think it was August, yeah. So I don't have those with me, but you guys know the drill. They look exactly the same as all of my vanilla socks. So yeah, but she said that she's been enjoying those to keep cozy this fall, so that's great. In terms of works in progress, I don't think I had these cast on in my last episode, but as many of you will know, I had spun up my first ever hand spun sock yarn in the spring, and give you a little close-up of how it's looking in the ball. So this was a Shetland wool that I spun into a 3-ply light fingering weight. It's a quite a light fingering weight. It was actually lighter than what I was aiming for. So once I had finished the yarn, I took a look at the wraps per inch, realized it was quite thin. I can't remember the exact wraps per inch count that I got. I know it's on a previous podcast. So my concern was that my usual needle size would be a bit too big to get like a dense fabric and a durable fabric for my socks. So usually I knit with 2.25 millimeter Chiagu circular needles. So I purchased some 2 millimeters, which are a US size 0. Very, very tiny. Yeah. So I cast on these hand spun socks for myself. Gosh, I think it was late in the summer, and I have made very little progress, but there is some progress to show you. I'm not sure that the lighting will give you a good indication of what's happening here, but this is the the front of the sock and the back of the socks. And I had been debating with different kind of simple sock patterns. And then, as you know, because I was so fatigued over the summer, I ended up just not even being able to fathom the idea of looking at a pattern. So I cast these on in my usual toe-up fashion, finished the toe like a vanilla toe, and then I just have been doing broken seed stitch on the front panel, and then on the back has just been plain stockinette. So it gives it a very, just a very subtle texture, which has been, it's been the perfect thing. It does make knitting these socks even slower than my usual vanilla sock would be, even though they are still quite simple. I think that's just because it's such a fine yarn and such a small needle, and because there's a little bit of purling on every second row, it slows me down a little as well. But I'm okay with slow right now, and I'm definitely not in my usual mode with FIBRE, where I would be, you know, so inspired to push myself to be productive. And in fact, it's not even pushing myself. When I'm feeling really inspired and energized, it just happens. I just make a lot, and that's just not the season that I'm in. So I'm just embracing that. Yeah, but I am loving how these are turning out. I think the gauge is tight enough that these will be fairly durable. I'm hoping so. Because I also spun the wool, spun this yarn up for the purpose of durability. It's a very high twist worsted sock yarn, and you can see, well, I don't know if you can see, but see how it's curling up on itself quite quickly. That's because it's very high twist. So that's my work in progress, I think. Mainly my only work in progress. I have occasionally been working on the big scrap garter stitch blanket that I showed on the podcast. It was a very early podcast episode. I have occasionally been working on that as well, and I keep planning to show you progress on that because I think it is looking pretty fun. It's pretty wild. So I have been picking away at that here and there. But I think that's really it in terms of my knitting works in progress. I feel like I should also say that I know I keep talking about how fatigued I was in my first trimester, but I've had a very uneventful pregnancy so far. I barely even had any real morning sickness, and you know, it was just kind of like this gentle queasiness that would go away as long as I was eating and not getting too hungry. But yeah, I think the fatigue was probably the biggest symptom that I've had, and so that's why I keep talking about it. It's just because that was kind of the main reason over the summer that I had a lack of knitting productivity. But I'm not complaining, because I really can't complain. I've been feeling so great overall. So really thankful for that. Spinning. Where should I start with spinning? I do have a couple of little yarn babies I can show you. I've been working on that old stack of roll eggs slowly over the summer and fall. It's Merino Corriedale blend. I don't have the, oh yes, I do have the roll eggs. I think I've shown you these many times, but I've been working on them. And these were roll eggs that I made on my blending board, and you know, really just haven't had a lot of experience spinning blending board roll eggs. And so when I started out spinning these, I was kind of doing my default short forward draw, which I've seen a lot of spinners do with blending board roll eggs. And I just found that I think it's has something to do with using such a fine fiber on the blending board. There are these bits throughout that seem to get fairly compacted. Maybe it happens regardless of the fiber. I don't really know. But what I found was I did a whole skein like that with short forward draw. And I just thought, I'll finish the skein, but I need to switch gears. I feel like this happens a lot. I always start out doing my default yarn, and then the fiber tells me at some point, like, what are you doing? You need to switch gears. So anyway, the first skein that I did turned out like this. And this is a fingering weight 2-ply. And I think it turned out beautifully, but it was so painful to spin. And I just wasn't in the mood for it. I think it was also my usual drive to want to have a consistent yarn that was making it even less enjoyable, because it was just working against me the whole time in terms of getting a consistent, thin, consistent yarn. So I managed to get through it for this one skein. And this isn't washed or set. I don't know the yardage, but I'm sure that I could probably get a pair of socks out of these. I know that would be a non-traditional sock yarn, but on a tight gauge, who knows, it might be okay. And because it's, I guess, it's a woolen prep with a worsted draw, short forward draw, there's a bit more strength added to it than if it were entirely a woolen yarn. So I don't know, we'll have to see. We'll have to see what I decide to do with this, because I really do love it. So that's one thing that came off my wheel fairly recently. And then, like I said, I switched gears and just decided, like, I just need to get through these roll eggs so that I can start spinning up some fiber that's a bit more pleasant for me, let's just say. So then I started just doing a long draw and paying absolutely zero attention to consistency, and I found that that has been exactly what I've needed in this season, is just to not care, to not need to kind of put any focus or attention into technique other than to get a kind of continuous single on my bobbin and then ply it. So that's been very freeing. And I'm, with the long draw, getting through these row legs a lot faster as well. So again, this is not a finished skein, but I pulled off this little skein about a week or so ago, I think, from my wheel. As you can see, it's the same row legs, so you're seeing the same color variations here, but spun in a very different way. So long draw, very thick and thin. I tried to ply it somewhat high twist. I love the look of a high twist yarn, but it's still, I think, still fairly balanced. Like this isn't washed, so it's hard to tell. But unwashed, it's still turning on itself a bit there. Yeah, so super fun. Not sure what I'll do with all of this when it's off the wheel. I'll probably end up getting at least 2 more small skeins this size. I really need to invest in getting larger bobbins eventually, because I'm just finding I'm getting to the point in my spinning where I have larger quantities of wool to spin for a project, but my bobbins are so small that I have to ply and wind a skein, a mini skein, several mini skeins often, rather than just being able to do larger skeins. So that's something on my wish list eventually, in addition to a rigid heddle loom. Yes, there's a rigid heddle loom in my future as well. So that was it for skeins to show you, but I did also want to show you the fleece that I've been processing. So I would have talked about purchasing this fleece, I think, a couple of podcasts ago. Everything is a bit of a blur from my previous podcasts now because it's been so long, but I purchased a fleece from Nystock Farms, which was on recommendation from Sarah Bone of the Crafting with Compassion podcast. She has had a lot of success with fleeces from Nystock Farms, and I wanted to go for my first fleece at least with, you know, a good recommendation, so that if I experiment in the future, I kind of have something to compare it. Like, I know what a quality fleece is, and then I'll have a better kind of gauge moving forward when I venture out into the world of selecting fleeces on my own. So I purchased a half fleece from a sheep named Chemise. She is a CVM Rambouillet Border Leicester cross. And I believe the average staple length for her was 4 to 4.5 inches with her wool. And I've slowly been kind of processing little batches of her wool over time, mainly since we moved into this house, because we have a backyard here and it's just a lot easier for me to wash the fleece in the kitchen and then dump the first wash water out back, because you don't want to pour the first wash water down your drain. It has a lot of lanolin and suet in it. I don't think the suet, which is basically sheep sweat, I don't think it can harm your plumbing, but the lanolin can, because when lanolin is hot, it's very soft and oily, but once cooled, it can coagulate, I think is the right word. It will harden and can actually block your plumbing, so you don't want to put the first wash cycle down your drain. And the first couple batches of wool that I washed were in our old apartment, which was like a 3-story walk up with no elevator. And I did it twice, where I had to carry this like somewhat heavy bucket of water out, and then it just was not nearly as convenient. But now that we've moved in to our new house, I'm finding it's much more manageable to process the fleece. And we also have more space for me to lay it out to dry. I basically just put a big laundry rack out with a mesh curtain. It's like an IKEA mesh curtain that I put over top of the laundry rack, and then I just lay out the washed wool, and it dries within like 24 hours, probably less that way. So I thought I would just show you some of the washed fleece. So that's some of the washed fleece. You can see that the tips of the fleece, there's still some, we've got like a piece of hay in there, all sorts of fun stuff. So the sheep had a happy life rolling in the pasture. And definitely what I'm learning is when you wash your fleece at first, that step gets out most of that suet and the lanolin, but you're still gonna have some veg matter and stuff like that in your fleece that will come out, or a lot of it will come out when you process it, either by carding or combing. Now, my intention was originally to get combs, and I had ordered combs. And they never arrived. So I had to call the company I ordered from, and it turned out that because the combs were handcrafted in Russia, there was already a delay associated with them arriving. And then it was also COVID times, so added complexities with international mail and trade, at least at the time. and this was over the summer. So I waited like 2 months for them to arrive, and they hadn't even shipped yet at that point. So I got a full refund and just decided combs will be for another time in my life. So I did look for a lot of alternatives. I really would love some Valkyrie hand combs, but they're really hard to come by right now. At least in my research, every time I found a supplier, if they had like 1 or 2 comb sets available, they'd be gone again. If I waited 24 hours, like they're just in such high demand, and I think there's not a lot of supply. There aren't a lot of people handcrafting these special tools anymore. What I decided to do was just go with hand cards. And I'm actually quite happy that I did, because in the end, when I actually got this fleece and was able to take a look at it, you can see, when I stretch this lock out, it is about 4 to 5 inches. But it's on the shorter end for combing purposes, and I don't have any experience combing a fleece, but I do think that hand carding this fleece, at least for my first experience, will be maybe a little easier with hand cards. Isn't that just such a beautiful color? I don't think I shared, I think this color is called Morite. I think on the website it was a Morite, and it's like this cross between like an oatmeal brown and a gray, which is like one of my favorite colors. You can probably tell my hand spun socks are a very similar color. So anyway, I just purchased a couple of standard hand cards, and have been excited to get to the point where I'm processing the fleece. I just have one more batch of fleece to wash, and then I'm going to transition to making roll legs. But I do have one roll leg, my first ever roll leg, to show you. Ta-da! So it is really nice and light and fluffy. There's still like tiny bits of veg matter here and there that I will have to pick out as I spin, but ultimately it's really exciting. It's my first fleece processing experience, and I'm really excited to get some roll legs made up so that I can start spinning this. What I will do with it, I don't know. So it was about 2.5 pounds of wool before processing. I'm not sure how much I have post-processing, but I'm sure it's more than enough for a big shawl. I was thinking about maybe a big hap shawl that, eventually I could wrap myself and baby in. I was actually looking at the campfire shawl from Espestrico. I know Sarah Bone from Crafting with Compassion has been hosting a fall shawl along, and I really wanted to participate. And I loved her choice of shawl, but again, given everything that's been going on, I didn't have the chance to participate, at least not this time around. But I love that shawl, the campfire shawl, I think it's called. That or something like that, I'm kind of envisioning would be lovely. And I may or may not dye the wool. We'll see. Other than that, some other future projects that I have in mind, I think I would love to try the Penguono pattern by Stephen West. And I kind of have some hand spun and leftover skeins from other projects that I think might go well together for a Penguono or a Penguino or both. Maybe I could do something matching for baby and me. We're just gonna have to see what the next season of life holds. But anyhow, I'm losing the sun behind the trees. Sorry about the lighting. I'll have to figure this out a little better moving forward. But it's been so lovely just to sit down, take a moment to be with you again and to talk about FIBRE. I hope to see you soon, but I also make no promises. And yeah, I hope that you're all well and safe, and that you have lots of FIBRE to keep your hands busy in the season, and that you're able to find the sense of community that you need to get you through this time, especially as at least in the northern hemisphere, things are getting colder, and it's harder to see friends and loved ones safely outdoors. So I hope you're finding what you need to cope in these times, and I look forward to seeing you again in whatever way, shape, or form that may be. Please, if you haven't already, feel free to hop on over to Instagram and follow me at Sea Salt and Stone. I tend to be a little bit active, or more active there, in between podcast episodes, and I would love to be able to connect with you in between these episodes. So anyhow, makers, wishing you a very makeful remainder of the fall season, and hope to see you again soon. Bye for now.